In this video, I'm going to talk about the unique way that EFT tapping can be used with couples counseling to make it much faster and more effective than traditional couples counseling. My name is Stefan Gonick. I'm an expert EFT practitioner, trainer, and founder of the Soulmate Attraction Academy from single-to-soulmate.me, and this is Love Talk Q&A. Now, when a couple goes to traditional couples counseling, the counselor mainly focuses on helping them learn more effective communication techniques to help them try and work things out with each other much better. And they may also try and help the couple connect with each other in the moment better. But there's a really big problem that couples have that traditional couples counseling doesn't really have an effective way of dealing with it. So in most long-term relationships and marriages, there's this repeating pattern that couples have where they seem to have the same fight or upsetting experience over and over and over again for years. Right? So it keeps repeating. It feels like they're in this rut that they can't get out of, and nothing they try works. And it tends to just lead to a buildup of pain and misery with each other that can lead to the end of the relationship or marriage. And then when a couple goes to a couples counselor to try and get help with this kind of thing, because this is always part of the counseling, the couples counselor will spend months trying to help them, learn good, effective communication techniques and then use those techniques to manage these patterns better, right? To help recover faster, to come back together easier. But there's nothing that they do to help these patterns to stop happening altogether. So it's kind of like they just have to accept that this is part of their relationship or marriage, and they just try and manage it better. So in order to understand what we can actually do about this, we first need to know where these repeating painful patterns come from. Because when these couples have repeating fights, it feels like the other person is causing them pain. But the truth is that these repeating patterns actually have nothing to do with their partner. What it has to do with is unhealed wounds from our childhood. So what's happening is that our partner will do something that in some way even just mildly reminds us of this unhealed wound from our childhood with one of our parents or a sibling. And then all the feelings from that wound come flooding in, and then the person will react or overreact in a similar way that they reacted to as a child, right? Which is something they figured out how to do when they were 5, right? So it's not necessarily the most healthy and effective way to react. And this is what will sort of start the fight, and then their overreaction will often trigger their partner's unhealed childhood wounds, and then they'll overreact, and it'll just boom, 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 keep escalating to this big painful fight. And the problem is that it's not about each other. It's about the childhood wound that's getting triggered in these situations. So it makes it really, really hard to work it out with each other because it's not about each other. This would be a lot easier to understand if I give you an example. So let's say there's this married couple, and the man, when he was a child, had a mother who, when he did something that she didn't like, and she started to say something to him about it, she would start out with an okay tone of voice, but then she would just kind of keep going on and on and on and get angrier and angrier and angrier until she's like screaming at him about it. And it could be over something relatively small. It was just the way she functioned, is that she would just kind of keep escalating until she lost all control and scream at him. And then as soon as she stopped, he would, his survival strategy was to get as far away from her as possible by either running into his room or running out of the house to get away from this painful situation. All right, so that was his coping strategy. Now, let's say he's married to a woman who's not like that at all. She's not a yeller. She doesn't escalate and get angry and all that stuff. Not at all. But just the act of bringing something up to him. So let's say he does something that she doesn't like, and she goes, honey, I'd like to talk to you about this thing that you did yesterday or this morning, whatever it was. And just the act of starting to bring something up, because remember when his mother would start to bring it up, she would start out sounding with a reasonable tone of voice. So just the fact that his wife was starting to bring something up would subconsciously be scary for him, that she would escalate into this screaming thing, and he would immediately get really defensive, right? Because he was afraid of that happening. And his defensiveness means that he wasn't listening. And maybe he was making excuses or whatever in a way that would then become frustrating for her. It's like, you're not listening to me, and her frustration would build until she started to get a little angry, just a little. So she would start to have a little anger in her tone of voice, not yelling, screaming, nothing like that, just a little bit. But the fact that she went from reasonable voice to just a little bit of anger would be the final trigger, and he would freak out and just storm out of the house, right? To get away from this screaming monster that he subconsciously thought she was about to become, right? And then when he would, leave in the middle of this discussion and leave the house, that would trigger her childhood wound of being abandoned by her father, okay? And then she'd be standing there in the room crying about, him running out of the house like that. So this is the kind of thing that's going on. So you can see that it's not really about the other person, right? It's not really about his wife. She's not doing anything wrong. She's just trying to bring something up in a perfectly normal way. And it just triggers that unhealed childhood wound. So this is where EFT can come in to be this incredible tool to resolve this pattern forever. And all you have to do is basically 3 steps. So like, for instance, when I'm working with a couple in a situation like this, and every couple is in a situation like this, right? The first step is identify the pattern. That's usually quite obvious because the couples are usually very aware of these repeating patterns they have all the time. The second step is to notice the trigger. So for instance, in that situation, it'd be talking to the guy who says, what are you noticing when your wife brings something up to you? And then as he kind of gets in touch with it, he would start to notice that it's reminding him of his experiences with his mother. All right. And there's a technique to help, if it's not immediately obvious where it's coming from, there's a technique I have to help people get in touch with the unhealed childhood wound. Then all you have to do, once you've done those first 2 steps, which are both pretty straightforward, is just heal 1 to 3 example memories from childhood of, in this case, his mother doing what she did, right? So we just heal 1 to 3 memories of her, escalating into a screaming fit, and that's all it takes to heal that wound, and in which case that trigger completely goes away forever. So that the next time his wife, once he's done 1 to 3 sessions healing that original wound, next time his wife brings up something with him, that subconscious fear that she's going to escalate into a screaming monster doesn't happen. He's not feeling that fear anymore, right? The wound is resolved. And so he just listens. It's like, yeah, sure, honey, go ahead. Tell me what's on your mind. Okay? So it's a remarkable thing to have the trigger be completely dissolved, completely go away, and this repeating pattern to completely going away, versus spending months working on it in couples counseling to try and manage it where it still never goes away, right? It just becomes more and more manageable, so the couple can survive it, but you're not thriving, right? You're not having this much happier, more peaceful relationship or marriage. So this is a really amazing, cool way that you can use EFT tapping in couples counseling that is so much faster, more effective. Now, interestingly, we didn't talk about the wife's experience, right? So what we do with her is she had this abandonment wound with her father. So again, heal 1 to 3 memories of that, and then she wouldn't get triggered if, let's say there was another trigger that we hadn't addressed yet, that again led him to storm out of the house. If we healed her abandonment wound, she would just go, okay, I guess he had to leave to go take care of himself for a while. And she wouldn't get triggered into her abandonment wound and wouldn't be standing there crying, right? But also notice that even if you address just one side of it, so for instance, I do this in couples counseling, but I also do this in individual counseling where, let's say I was working with the husband and he was telling me, God, my marriage, I had this pattern with my wife. Every time she tries to bring something up with me, this stuff happens, right? So even if we just address one side of it, just his part, that, would still eliminate that particular pattern, right? Even without addressing her side of it. So it's this wonderful technique to really clear out these repeating painful patterns and have, like I said, a much happier, more peaceful marriage. So now if you would like help with this kind of thing in your relationship or marriage, I invite you to contact me at singletosoulmate.me and set up a free 20-minute discovery session to talk about it. So I hope this video was helpful. If it was, it would really help me and other people to find this video. If you can just take a quick second to like the video. Also, subscribe to my channel to get my latest episodes of the Love Talk Q&A show. So keep tapping, and I'll see you on the next episode.